Hello everyone and welcome to another brilliant sport and lifestyle biz here on your Real Footy Radio, UK Health Radio. Well, unbelievably, it's the last show of June and we have a fantastic one for you. New to the show is John Hathaway, former rugby player and UFC star, now in MMA in Germany. We listened to part one from John. We also have pieces from Connie HUQ, former TV presenter and children's author on how your children can plan money, and Louis DELETRAZ, FIA and WeatherTech Championship endurance star. Throw in our SLB Sports Roundup and we know you're going to love the show. Well, everybody, this week I'm joined by a very special person. New to us for the show regarding sport. He's a UFC fighter. It's John the Hitman Hathaway. John, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me on.
No problem. Absolute pleasure. And thank you for joining us and giving us your time. It's really appreciated and definitely a sport that I enjoy. Not quite your normal sport because it's very, very combat, obviously, and dangerous. But yeah, really looking forward to chatting to you about it. So thank you.
Pleasure. Obviously, been a big fan of combat sports. I think I started kind of watching, combat sports, boxing as particularly when I was young, but obviously got into UFC probably around the age of 15.
Yeah. And
then managed to get my first kind of two professional fights while I was 18, so before I turned 19, and I've kind of never looked back, really. I just enjoy kind of every aspect of the combat sports.
Brilliant. I mean, that's amazing. Absolutely fabulous and interesting, which we'll come on to, obviously. But if you don't mind, if we could just go back to a little bit earlier, just so the listeners get to know you a little bit more. Growing up, what sports were your number one? And was UFC, combat or boxing your first, or was it something different?
Me, it was always rugby. I mean, I played rugby from a young age. I've got two older brothers who've also played rugby.
Okay.
They still play rugby for the local club. And probably when I stopped competing, I will join them, and I've joined them plenty of times actually during kind of like, or in between competitions. So it's always good to kind of have a run out with like the old club. And again, a lot of my old friends still kind of play for it. So it's kind of always nice to play for a team sport as well. Combat sports always being generally, as much as you train in a team, individual sport when you're out there.
Yeah. I mean, and that's fabulous. The team environment, it's slightly different, isn't it? Because you're playing for your mates, as it were, as well, rather than just yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you win or lose, you're all in kind of together, and again, you can all enjoy it afterwards together as well, which is always nice.
Yeah, brilliant. And it sounds like a family sport.
I mean, my dad actually played football and did some boxing when he was younger, but he never kind of got far in the combat sports. But I don't know why my oldest brother picked rugby, but he started and liked it, and obviously being a young brother, me and my other brother just followed him into it, and obviously enjoyed it immensely since.
And that is sort of combat, isn't it? Even though it's compared to football, it's class a gentleman's game as in respect to the officials and things like that. It's very much a combat sport. It's very tough rugby.
Most certainly. I think it gets you used to kind of every aspect of what a combat sport brings, just in the bumps and bruises and the kind of multi-dynamicness of it, the fact that you're never running in a straight line, you always have to change directions, you have to take impacts from different sides and set yourself in good positions to be able to make impacts.
Yeah, you're right. And so obviously you were used to the bumps and the scrapes, as it were, obviously in a totally different aspect. Most of them in rugby would be just contact and accidental contact most of the time, we'll say. But obviously mixed martial arts, UFC, is very, very different. What was it that really drew you to it? Was it seeing it on television? What was it?
Yeah, I saw it on television. It used to be played on Sky Sports, and it was just kind of a mixed show, so it wasn't a full show. It was just different matches from different shows, what they had. And I always just liked competition, really, and I just saw it and thought that this looked amazing. Obviously I was a Bruce Lee and kind of like kung fu movies from at that age.
Yeah. I
just kind of didn't look back. I think I started buying, it was a different era, I guess, back then. You didn't really have the internet. You couldn't really check these things out. So I remember buying kind of like black belt or like martial arts magazines basically, and just kind of like finding stuff from there, really.
Oh yeah, and you're right, it's totally different now, isn't it? It's a click of a button and you can see pretty much anything you want to. So obviously the intrigue perhaps was there. What inspired the change from rugby? Was it just something you thought, yeah, I want to have a go at that, or was there something else?
Not so much. I mean, I kind of like started to do it, I think, from the age of 15. I mean, initially from these kind of like black belt magazines, I got some VHSs of like kind of some combat people doing kind of pancrase or mixed martial arts. Started watching them. There wasn't really any gyms around at the time in the area, so I started doing it with my rugby friends. I mean, it's the handy with the rugby team was having 15 plus other guys who are athletic and into kind of like contact sports.
Right, yeah.
Taught them. And so then I had people to do it with, and then eventually kind of found a local club, I think when I was about 17, and started going down there. But I mean, for me, I still played rugby into my 20s.
Right, okay.
For the local team. I got into the adult team for the first team. I mean, I think around the age of 18, I kind of made a better decision that I was going to go down the combat route rather than the rugby route. Had my trials down at Bristol Academy to get into their academy for rugby. And basically, it was around the age or around the time when rugby players just started getting ridiculously big. And I mean, I'm fairly big. I'm 6'2". you know, I walk around at probably like 84, 85 kilos,
Right.
but the guys were just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
You know, so I kind of was at a push that I have had to try to put a lot of weight on or kind of start going out. And obviously with the mixed martial arts, what I wanted to get into, obviously it's done by weight classes, so I didn't want to put in too much weight because I wanted to fight obviously in a fairly more natural weight class rather than a higher up one, because I thought my height was quite good for the kind of welterweight division. And basically kind of made my decision from there. Obviously I could have gone down Bristol and stuff like that, but I didn't want to leave my friends who were group and people who I knew in kind of the Brighton area. So I basically made the choice then that I'd stay. Obviously I carried on playing rugby and started getting my kind of like early professional fights in. Yeah. And just finding my feet in combat sports.
Wonderful. And we'll move on to that now, obviously, which is what you're doing at the moment. You've got an impressive record. You've had about 20 fights, 18 wins. One thing that I did notice when I was looking at that is that you've got 5 by KO and 4 by submission, which, from my very inexperienced knowledge, is quite rare. Normally you're either one or the other. Is that correct? Or is it changing and you're getting people that are just good at everything now?
I think nowadays definitely everyone's good at everything. Obviously, a lot of people, when I started, came from a particular thing. So they were either a stand-up guy who was KOing people or a ground guy who was submitting people. So I was kind of, I guess, one of the first generations of people who started doing mixed martial arts as like its own sport. So being able to do both kind of thing. But obviously nowadays it's very different. People, there is a whole mixed martial arts gym. So before you would have to go to a boxing gym or a grappling gym. Or, I mean, there wasn't even that many of them, but you would start kind of picking up rather than it's far more diverse now. A lot of people do everything at every gym. So it's more common nowadays, but I mean, it was fairly uncommon, I guess, back in the day, or less common, so to say.
Yeah. So it's probably a bit like most sports, really. They do all evolve. If you look at football, there's people that can do defending and attacking now, rather than just the one. And I suppose cricket, I know it's a totally different sport to what you do, but people that just use to either bat or ones that just use to bowl, and now there's people that do all of it. You know, I suppose it's like all sports are evolving. So without sounding obvious, does that make your job trickier because you effectively have to plan for everything rather than just defending a stand-up KOer, as you said, or someone that's on the ground that's trying to get you into submission?
Oh, most certainly. I mean, but that's part of the joy in the sport and in competing, is just the fact that you've got to worry about everything now. So there's so much more to kind of like deal with. But again, obviously it makes it harder, but it makes it a lot more enjoyable. And again, you always just got to kind of play to your strengths or what you think your strengths are in that match and work towards doing them.
Yeah, worry about yourself and let them deal with you, sort of thing.
Oh, most certainly. I think it's a far better way of doing it, right? Because you can always get caught up in what the other team or the other person can do. Yeah. And then not slightly maybe neutralising what they do, but not end up doing what you do best.
So that's a really good point for people to know. In all sports, again, you do have to worry and plan for your opposition, but I always find coaching football that I'd rather be attacking and get them to worry about us without being too risky, if that makes sense. You know, you've got to defend your line, but making the other team worry about you.
Almost certainly. I think one of the greatest lines I've ever heard with kind of things like this, or at least the thought process that I always like to think of, is you've got to want to win. You just can't not want to lose. Not wanting to lose isn't good enough. It's not the same as wanting to win. You know, I can plan from like seeing what he's going to do and just try not to let him do it, which is not me trying to win. It's just me trying not to lose.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that. So you made your MMA debut, John, on the 25th of June, 2006. You won by rear naked choke, which sounds complicated. Just tell us, you know, first of all, about when you stepped inside to the cage on your first fight and how you actually felt. And B, rear naked choke. How difficult is it to pull that off?
It's not overly difficult to see that you have to be behind someone, so it's a choke, it's a strangle from behind. I mean, for me, I never really get too nervous or whatever. It's something that I've done lots of times in the build-up to a competition. You kind of go for every kind of scenario and rehearsal almost. So by the time you get on, say, the stage, it'll be the same for a theatre performance first time. You may get a little nervous or apprehensive in the build-up to it, but by the time you're doing it, you've done it so many times that it is just second nature. You know, same for football players or any type of kind of like person who needs to perform. That repetition is kind of what gets you in, and then by the time you get up, you're kind of meant to be there. It's what you're naturally doing. So I mean, for my first match, it really was, I mean, I was fighting someone who was a fair bit shorter than me, but he was kind of came from my bodybuilding background. He kind of looked incredible and must have been very strong. But obviously I quickly got a takedown, got on top, started putting pressure on him. He rolled over, which enabled me to take his back and put the choke in. I put the strangler.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Well, hello everybody. This week we're joined by a very special lady. She's a TV presenter and a children's author. It's Connie Huq. Hi Connie, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thanks, John.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, you've got a history of television, writing children's books, but there's a new initiative that I think you started, or you have started, and you're looking to get the message across. It's called Over Piggy Bank. I wonder if you could just start off by telling us a little bit about what it's about.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, this actually stems back because you're right. I have a long career working with children and young people. But actually, few people know, I did my degree in economics at university. And as part of that, my dissertation was on young people, consumerism and spending habits. So this ties in nicely with this initiative by NatWest, which is Rooster Money, essentially. Now, every year, NatWest bring out their PMI, the Pocket Money Index, and using the users of Rooster Money, which is a whopping about 125,000 people we've used to do this research. We've looked into sort of current spending patterns, current pocket money data to see what our kids are earning today and where they're getting their money from. And the findings are quite interesting, I have to say, and they're quite reflective of the modern times that we're living in.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know, obviously, doing a lot with children myself and speaking to a lot of parents, I know that some tackle it differently. Some give their children money when they need it. Some give them an allowance, so it allows them the ability to budget their money. Because I don't think you notice £5 here, £10 here. So they do that. What is the current sort of state of play? Yeah, pocket money and the rising of it.
Yeah, so we found actually this year the amount of young people receiving weekly pocket money has gone down. And that could be a direct effect of the sort of pinch we're all feeling at the moment. And so that actually could have been compensated to some extent by the fact that one-off payments are on the up. So that comprises of 39% of young people's earnings. So that's money that children might get, for instance, on their birthday, a visit from the tooth fairy, essentially, your sort of one-off windfall gain. And as I was growing up, I never used to get weekly pocket money. So that used to be sort of my main source of income. I'd save money from Christmas or from birthdays, so on and so forth. And also, there were children at my school that would get entrepreneurial and sort of, you know, we had someone that used to sell snacks, you know, in a sort of undercover tuck shop, essentially at break times. I used to actually do cartooning and I used to sometimes sell comic strip sort of pictures and doodles that I had done. So that was another sort of income stream for me. If we're looking at what our findings from our survey pool, essentially, or the data pool rather, gave us, actually, there's been a huge increase in the amount of older kids tutoring younger kids, which I think is quite a nice way to earn money because it's not only sort of making them revise and, you know, maybe relearn their times tables or whatever, but actually it's doing something good for their, you know, younger siblings, essentially. There's stuff like upcycling and selling things on, which has found its way into our data, and that's climbed 6% this year. And then there are obviously your traditional money makers like babysitting, for instance, and earning from stuff like that has risen by 24%. But, you know, getting kids to do chores is a really good way of them earning money because it means that it takes the pressure off having to give them pocket money, essentially. And it also means that you can get things done at a better price. So we've compiled the top 5 most lucrative earners. And they are, do you want to have a guess at some of the stuff that's in there? Or
what, like chores, you mean?
Yeah, chores around the house, essentially.
Is it car washing?
Yes, you're right. No, car washing is number 1.
Oh, is it?
So car washing is the biggest earner, earning £2.46, which if you think about it, you know, you couldn't get that at your local car wash, so that's good. And you're absolutely right as well. Vacuuming's in there at number 3, 96 pence. That can get you, this is an average, obviously. Helping in the garden, doing laundry, and helping with the shopping are other ones that are all in there. Did you used to get pocket money growing up?
I did. Times obviously it was a lot longer ago, but I did effectively get it. But I did almost earn my money, if that makes sense. You know, I would help out around places. You try the cheeky ones like I'll tidy my room, but I was told in no uncertain terms that should be
should be done anyway.
That should be
right?
done anyway. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
well, you know what? It's funny you should say that, but we found that actually in some instances, people are getting money for doing their homework, like it incentivises to do homework, which as a parent, I'm like, that should be a given, definitely. And also kids doing well in school subjects are sometimes getting bonuses, but those are few and far between, I think, compared to your traditional learners.
It is interesting though, and I think it's a good thing. It encourages the children to learn about life skills as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing, so kids are sort of shaping and forming in their primary years. By your secondary years, you're consolidating. By your 20s, you're so fixed that I'm always saying by your 30s, you need therapy to undo it all. And I don't know about you, John, but sometimes I can't remember things that have happened last week or even yesterday.
No,
but
I agree.
When it comes to long-term memory, there's things that you remember from, back in the day. And I used to have to save up sort of money from birthdays and Christmas and so on. And I remember my very first trip abroad was to France. And I had taken my birthday money with me and I managed to lose it all on the metro. And that really, scarred me for life, essentially. But it taught me the value of money, the value of budgeting and the value of saving. And essentially, I'm always saying, we are shaping and forming the adults of tomorrow, aren't we? So it's good that they have the right values, the right sort of skill set, the right responsibilities. And my oldest is going off to secondary next year. Right. So with that comes a degree of independence, doesn't it? He'll be walking to school. His route will go past the shops. There'll be bottles of Prime in those shops, wanting to be bought. Don't get me started on Prime. That's a whole different subject. But, so it is important to make sure that we're growing the adults of tomorrow in the right way.
Yeah, I agree. I won't get you started on Prime because I know you asked not to, but just for an example, I just picked up something this morning. There's a garage near to me. I live in a little village, and there's a garage near me that sells it for £2.99, which I think is quite cheap. I don't buy it myself, but obviously a lot of...
it sells on the black market for like £13 upwards.
I know. And obviously a lot of the girl footballers, 12, 13, 14, they all like it, and they're telling me how much they paid for it in the past, and I'm like, wow, well, why would you do that?
That's crazy.
So there's a garage that sells it for £2.99, and about a stone's throw from the garage has a little mini supermarket, and they're selling exactly the same product for £4.49. And even that, it's not cheap.
Around here, in the little local shopping lane, they're selling £13.
Yeah, that's terrible.
So, it's crazy, but kids will pay that for it because it's endorsed by this popular YouTuber or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, there's so many fads nowadays that are vying for young people's money, like the one that my son wants for his birthday with these bottles that come with these pods. Each pod is £10 and the bottle is even more just for a bottle that holds water, essentially. And, they all want these bottles, and these pods make the water sort of essentially smell of different flavours.
Oh, right,
so
okay.
So this is the thing. You need to sort of make them aware.
But you're right, the cost of living is going up, and even though social media can be a good thing at times for them to sort of learn, and in general, stuff like this, because a YouTuber or a Instagram guy, £13 for a drink. You're right, about 6 months ago it was being sold near me in a different shop for £12, and you sort of think, if my son or daughter, because I've got twins, they're older now, they work, so they've got their own money, but if they'd have come back as a child and said, I've just paid £12 for a drink, I would be wondering what I'd done wrong. Do you know what I mean? It's like...
No, well, you know what's brilliant is my eldest son tried it. He took a swig of it and he said, I prefer our normal orange squash to this. And I thought, yes, good, that's the right answer.
That's a godsend. That's
great. Don't believe the hype.
No, I agree with you.
And he's quite good like that. He's quite good at just thinking his own thing.
You're dead right, and obviously talking about this and what we're doing and putting this on the radio will be, I think, of a real benefit to people that are listening, because they probably have the same, how do we stop this, or what can we do? Obviously, you said that you actually studied for this in sort of university, which people didn't know, and obviously you're using that to incorporate in this. What are you doing to help make people aware? Is it actually a push, or is it something that's just an initiative that can only be available to people if they sort of want it rather than being shown to them?
So anyone can visit the Rooster Money website, which shows, and all the fascinating, the findings are really, really interesting because, there's things that I was like, oh, wow, I couldn't have predicted that. That's interesting. But nowadays, young people do have the opportunity of having these cards. So remember I told you about losing all my birthday money.
Yes.
Had I had a Rooster card instead, and I am the worst. I lose my keys, I lose my phone, and as you can see, it's passed down to my child. his school bag the other day. So, that's one of the benefits, obviously. But also being able to manage your money and for parents to be able to see the habits. My kids are really into gaming and screens and all of that. And it's really handy that we've got an ability to see what they're looking at on the internet by, sort of being, Big Brother is watching them.
Yes,
and essentially this is the same thing, but for kids purchasing and spending. And there's loads of different sort of facilities. So, for instance, there's like a star chart for younger kids and a virtual pocket money tracker. Lots of different sort of ways that kids can kickstart their money management, and parents can get involved as well, which is brilliant. And like I'm saying, there comes a time when you have to go, actually, they do need a prepaid debit card because they're perhaps travelling to school on their own, or for whatever reason it is, they are inevitably always going to be swayed by their peers. So, my kids are wanting mobile phones. I haven't given them mobile phones yet, but, there comes a time when actually it becomes a good, responsible thing to do. And it's different for each person in each family. But I am going to get my child a debit card for when he starts secondary school next year. And actually, like I said, at least if he loses the debit card, he's not losing the hard cash essentially. So as we move into a digital world, there are sort of benefits as well as drawbacks. The drawbacks being Robux and V-Bucks and Minecoins, if you know what they are.
Well, I know, it is. It's a different currency. But so it's all good points really, isn't it? Because even that coaches them for real life, having to live on a card, because there are places that are cashless as well now these days.
I know.
So it's
exactly
a good thing.
That, I have had to send my kids off to school when they have sort of like dress up in your own clothes for charity day and all this stuff. And it's like always £1. And sometimes I'm like, do you have any coins to my husband? He's like, no. And I'm like, no. Because it's so easy not to have actual money these days.
I agree.
Because everything is sort of click and collect, tap and touch, Apple Pay, whatever.
It's all so easy now, isn't it? So, no, that's a really good initiative. And that, you said, is under the Rooster Money website.
Yes, it's roostermoney.com, which is part of NatWest. And all the information and all the facts and figures are there.
No, that's wonderful. I will make a little mention about that on the radio, and I'll make a little post about that if that helps at all. We'll promote this if that's okay, which will hopefully help things like that. Just one thing before you go, Connie, if you've got time, is I know you mentioned about the pinch, as it were, the cost of living crisis, as some call it. Do you find that children are being educated with that as well, or you find that solely down to the parents?
Actually, I don't think as such. There are some schools that do citizenship lessons and so on. I don't think as such all schools have it essentially on the curriculum, but I'm finding more and more schools are watching news round, and my school's one of those. They show their kids news rounds essentially in school, and so often my children will come home and they'll tell me something that I haven't actually seen. Trump's been arrested or whatever it is. And I'm like, I missed that. So they do know about the situation we're in through watching news rounds essentially at school. But I can't vouch for whether every school is educating their kids about it. I think there are some life lessons that really are valuable for kids to be learning in schools. And I think managing money, and I remember as a child not understanding what taxes were. I just thought they were this evil thing, but I didn't know they paid for hospitals and schools and roads and all of that stuff. And even sort of, left and right thinking and sort of, just basics, the fundamentals, which you can go and take and use however you want to. They're not really taught sort of, and you only sort of start getting to know them as a grown up, essentially. So I do think there is something in that.
Brilliant. Well, I think I've got a little icon, Connie, so I think I've come to the end of the time limit with you. I'd like to, through the channel, stay in touch and perhaps do something else with you if it's going to help.
Yeah, definitely. Up for that.
I just want to say thank you so much for your time. We'll get your message across and hope to speak to you again soon.
Yeah, likewise. Cheers.
Thanks, Connie.
Take care, John.
And you. Bye-bye.
See you.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Well, everybody, joining me today is an absolute superstar in the motorsport world. It's Louis DELETRAZ, Switzerland racing driver. Hi, Louis. How are you?
Hello. I'm really good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, absolutely brilliant. Thank you for giving your time up. I really, really appreciate that. I just really want to get the listeners to know about you, what you do. We know currently you're competing in 3 different championships, which means you must be so busy, but obviously a good thing. We'll come on to the championships in a while. So if everyone could get to know you a little bit better, I wonder if you could tell us what it was like growing up, how you got into motorsport and what really got you hooked into it.
Yeah, it's actually a family story for me. Basically, my dad was racing. He went to Formula 1 for a few races, but he did mostly sports cars racing with Le Mans 24 Hours. And his F1 stuff was before I was born. Probably I visited my first race in the belly of my mother when I was still not born. And then I was on track, following some of my dad races. And I have memories from childhood there. So I guess that's what got me into motorsport. And then, we had a lot of fun with my dad when he put me in karting and we started together. So that's I guess he never forced me, but I always wanted to do it and always had passion for this sport.
Fabulous. So obviously you had the bug, really. As you said, you went there while you were still inside your mum's tummy, which is fabulous. How did you start out? What was your first in-race action in motorsport?
So now motorsport has evolved so much. You see those 3-4 years old kids, actually Max Verstappen started at 2, I think, karting, and much earlier than me. My dad was a bit worried that I was too young. When I was 8 years old, I was like, I want to race. He said, it's a bit early for karting. Let's go do soapbox. So soapbox is basically downhill. You create your own car with some wood 4 wheels and you put some brakes on. You make in your own garage in the winter. And it goes downhill, no engine, so you just race as quick as you can. And we had a lot of fun building one in the garage over winter with my dad and making some races. That's actually how I started. And then we showed up to the first race and we saw all the competitors and tried to copy them, and because they had better cars than us. And obviously this was the start of it. When I was 10 years old, straight away I went to karting and moved up from there, then single seater and etc. Obviously result was the objective, and as it went well I could move up.
Great. So you started early. You said you went on karting. A couple of things that I noticed that you've obviously done well at. You were in the Formula Renault that you went for a few years, the GP2 series and Formula 2 as well. How did those years help you and what was your highlight during them?
Yeah, exactly. The first competitive championships I did was Swiss Championships in karting, which I won twice.
Yeah.
And then when I was about 15, there was either going international with karting, doing the World Championships, European Championships. But money is always a big topic in motorsport. And it was either going international, and the amount of money asked was insane, and we didn't have it. And then I got an offer from BMW to race in their Talent Cup, was a junior, Formula 4 basically of before. And that was much cheaper to actually race proper single-seater cars. And that's how I moved in. Did my first year there, it was fantastic. Went to Formula Renault, the European Championship, which I won in the end after the third year, and the second, the World Championship. The Formula Renault 2 liter was like a Formula 3 of right now. And then I moved to GP2, which became Formula 2. It was basically the same category, just different cars. Did a few podiums there, never won, unfortunately. I think I was not always the right place, right moment, but with no regrets. And always tried to move up to Formula 1. Did my Formula 1 tests, had good results, but in the end it's very political. There's only 20 spots at the top level, and I didn't make it, but I was very close and there was no regrets.
No, and it is that sort of key thing, isn't it? It's a bit like Formula 1, as you said, there's only 20 seats. To liken that, it's a bit like football, for example, in the Premier League. You could have a brilliant season, but you still may not win it. It doesn't mean you've had a bad season. And just because you don't make one of them 20 seats doesn't mean you're not a good driver. You're still a very good driver. But as you said, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's right place, right time, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. There's 20 drivers in Formula 1, 20 in Formula 2, and about 30 in Formula 3. I think the years I was in Formula 2, I was with Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Albon, Russell. We were all good. And I think the top 15 of Formula 2, put in the Mercedes those years, which was dominating, or the Red Bull right now, would have done well. Very well, because the level is incredible, and I have so much respect for all my competitors, because I think we all fought at so high level, which actually taught me a lot for where I am right now, and I think definitely shaped me up for competitive and trying to always do my best, because you fight against the best constantly, and not everyone makes it to F1. And there's no problem in this, because then obviously the second best route is endurance racing, which I'm in now, and sports cars, where with other manufacturers, and the level is also incredibly high, and obviously we make a living out of it, so that's always the objective.
Absolutely. And one thing I was going to say was, you mentioned that you were very, very close, and just how close you were, I can say two things, was that you were put on the F1 Young Driver programme, which obviously is a massive compliment to you. But then you were also named as a test driver for Haas, which again is the next step down from having a seat, isn't it?
It is is the next step that I mean. I got reserve driver 2 years. I was doing all the sim development for Ferrari and Haas in F1 for 2 years too. So I was very close attending a lot of GPs, and I drove the car in Abu Dhabi. I think it was 2019, which was already like putting like 1 foot in the dream, being very close to it. And yeah, then obviously things didn't turn out this way. Obviously it was very close, I think, for me to be in Formula One when Grosjean had his crash in Bahrain with the fire, which I think most of people saw now. Which he was very lucky to be still alive. It's incredible. Obviously, I'm super happy for him that it all went well. And I was very close to replace him at those last 2 races in Bahrain and Abu Dhabi. It didn't work out. That's like it is. But I think I have no regrets. Had a super license. And I think I can be proud of being in that situation of maybe having been in Formula One.
Absolutely. I mean, how amazing is that? Like, it's every boy's dream pretty much, And you were like within touching distance, and sounds like you were pretty unlucky not to get a drive, which is amazing credit to you again. What was it like to be part of the experience of Romain Grosjean's crash in Bahrain? I mean, it must have been an absolute miracle. Well, it is a miracle, surely, that he escaped pretty much unhurt, wasn't it, as well, really?
Yeah, the crash of Romain, to be honest, was horrible. Romain is a very close friend of mine. I remember watching the race because I was on site. And when I saw this, I think everyone thought he was dead.
Yeah, I agree.
There was no outcome of this. Racing is dangerous, we all know it. I mean, we accept the risk. The safety has improved a lot, but this crash was just insane. And I really thought that day I lost a very good friend. Yeah. And seeing him climbing out of the fire was obviously crazy. A lot of joy to see him walk out. And then I visited him next day in the hospital, and seeing him, he was fine and just slightly burned in the hands. It's incredible. So it was a really bad moment for all of us to watch, but the outcome of it is obviously great because Romain's alive and with us and still racing.
Of course, yeah. And it must have been, when you saw him, it must have been like a rub your eyes moment.
It was really long, 1.5 minutes when he was on the fire. I don't obviously remember everything because it was, I think everyone's a bit in the shock, but it was very, very long. This 1 minute 30 felt like forever. And I cannot even imagine for his wife, kids who I know very well, who was home in Switzerland, watching this on TV. I think it's horrible.
Absolutely. Yeah, thankfully, I suppose in a way they weren't there, but I suppose at that time, perhaps they wanted to be, because, you want the first-hand update, don't you, really? Yeah, absolutely amazing and fabulous that he come out so unscathed, really.
Exactly. The safety improved so much thanks to FIA. Also with the halo on the cars now, I think we're much more protected. Sports cars racing, we have a roof, so we're less exposed to danger, but obviously still that those high speed when you crash, the body never likes it.
No, absolutely. So that's all brilliant. Obviously after that, you went to the endurance. What was the reason for the switch? Was it because it was the best drive offer you had, or was it something you'd been interested in looking at doing anyway?
Basically in Formula 2, you don't really get paid. Okay. You have to find sponsors, you have to make it work, because it's a way to try to go to Formula 1, but you cannot make a living out of Formula 2. So it's either you move to Formula 1 or at some point you have to commit to something else. I got an offer over winter from WRT, one of probably the best endurance team in the world right now, and with teaming up with Robert Kubica in the European Championships. And I mean, when I got the offer, it was great. I didn't even hesitate. I took it. And I mean, we went on to win the endurance championship first timers. And I think this was the start of my endurance career. And I mean, I had no doubts of going. I always wanted to do this and Le Mans because I saw my dad doing it, and it's not like a plan B. It's something I always wanted to do. And that's how it went. Yeah, the offer was great. And I loved endurance racing. I'm so happy right now and enjoying it. So plus the opportunities and yeah, as I said again, in Formula 2 you cannot make a living of it. In endurance racing, that's where you can make a career of 15 or 20 years.
Wow, and that's amazing. Obviously, the long endurance, how do you find that as a driver? Is it something that you had to get used to, or is it something you adapted to quite quickly?
The first thing is ego, because in single-seater you don't share your car, you're alone.
Right.
You have a team behind you, but you're alone in the car. Endurance racing, obviously every 2.5 hours, 3 hours, you switch driver and try to bring the car to the end of the race, obviously in a good position. And you need to work together. You need to support each other. There should not be ego. And I always get along well with my teammates, so I think that's suits me well. And obviously physically it's tough because you don't sleep. 24-hour race, you sleep maybe 1-2 hours and you're driving at those very high speeds. It's tiring. You lose 3-4 kilos while you drive at the end of the race. It's insane. So the physical challenge is very big.
Yeah, I imagine it is. And as you said, ego, I didn't even actually think of that possibility, because I presume cars, slightly different, I think, obviously, the endurance cars, but like Formula 1 cars and Formula 2 cars, they're actually set up specifically for you, aren't they?
Exactly. You need to make compromises in endurance because it needs to fit everyone's the best, because that's the quickest way to the end.
Yeah.
The races are much longer. In Formula 1, you really have to kind of kill your teammate because that's the reference. He has the same car as you, and you want to be better to keep your job. And for us, it's a bit different. We have to work together to win.
And it's amazing. Fabulous. So you've won a couple of titles, the European Le Mans Series. Tell us about how that was, you know, not only the feeling of winning it, but obviously through the series, you obviously were right up there all the way.
So far, I have to say I've been lucky. I guess I did the right work and right choices, but we won the European Championship in 21 and 22, so the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And we're currently leading again in 23, so I hope I can make it 3 years in a row because it will be pretty fantastic. So we won a lot of races, a lot of nice races. We've been competitive everywhere. We also won the American Championship last year and finished second in Le Mans, so obviously we missed the top step in Le Mans. But the last few years have been great to me, and can only say thank you to all the people who helped me there.
So currently, as we said earlier, you drive in 3 series. Before we move on to your big race coming up, can you quickly tell us the 3 series and a little bit about them?
So the first one is the FIA World Endurance Championship, which is including the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which we're racing in next week. This has 7 rounds all across the world, so Europe, US and Asia. So this is one of the championship. Also still race full-time in America, which is an amazing championship because the people are very different. The culture is very different in America, and they have much more freedom in the racing and in all how they see things, which is nice, I have to say. And as well, the European Championship, which only takes place in Europe with shorter races. The races are like 4 hours long, so less long, still long, but not as long as the 24 hours one. And this makes around 20 races a year, which is, a great calendar.
Brilliant. As you said, you won the European Le Mans Series the last 2 years. You're going for 3 in a row. The big race next weekend is the Le Mans 24 Hour, which you've currently just got to. You've got testing this weekend, as you said. Tell us a little bit about Le Mans, what it means, the whole thing attached to it, and your experiences so far in the race.
Le Mans is impossible to explain without attending, I think. It's a fantastic race. First of all, I think this year they are expecting 350,000 spectators for the race, which is, I think, one of the biggest sporting events probably in the world. On site, 350,000 spectators. So the atmosphere, the ambience is just amazing. Then the track itself is 13 kilometers long. Half of it is on a city, on streets. You have very long straight line, very high speed. We can reach up to, in the past years, 350. This year the cars are a bit slower, 330 kph. So it's fast. There's traffic. You drive at night. There's very mixed conditions. It can be raining at night. I mean, this race has history, it's special. And I think if you ask any drivers, you want more to win Le Mans than winning the championship. So we have a big task this weekend.
Wow. So it's that big that for some it's rather win the race than the actual championship. So tell us the car you're driving and your race number.
So we'll be racing in LMP2, which is the name for Le Mans Prototypes 2. It's a spec car, so there's 24 very similar cars. Basically, They're the same, just setup is different. There's 3 drivers on it. We have number 41, and we're definitely going to push hard to win it.
And you've got a very real chance?
Well, I think so. Actually, in 2021, same lineup, same car number. We were leading after 23 hours and 58 minutes. Oh. And unfortunately, the car stopped in the last lap, so it was really terrible for us because we lost Le Mans. We have revenge to take on this. Last year we finished second, so last 2 years we were either first or second the whole time in the race. So hopefully in 23 it's ours.
And did you finish second because you'd lapped everyone else apart from the car that passed you?
No, so in 21 we finished far off because we didn't cross the finish line, so we didn't get classified.
Oh, okay.
We were leading with 40-second gap, but we didn't classify. Last year in 2022, we finished second in the race, so actually I think we can be quite proud of this because being 2 years in a row fighting for the victory in a race like this is good. So again, the goal this year is to finish the job and get the win.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to, Louis. Thank you for giving us your time today. Is it okay to perhaps speak to you after Le Mans and you can tell us about the experience and how you went?
Yeah, of course. Let's do that. No problem. Hopefully with good news.
Brilliant. Well, for today, Louis DELETRAZ, Switzerland racing driver. Good luck next Sunday and thank you very much.
Thank you.
We finish off this week's show with our SLB Sports Roundup featuring golf, horse racing, cricket, tennis and motorsport. We start with golf, and the PGA Tour held the Travellers' Championship from the TPC River Highlands, and it was won by back-to-form Keegan Bradley. Dominating the whole tournament, Keegan finished on -23 in a fantastic performance. Tied second place, Zach Blair and Brian Harman 3 shots back on -20, and it was a good field, including Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, Victor Hovland, John Rahm, but Keegan Bradley was supreme for the 4 days. This week they have the Rocket Mortgage Classic from the Detroit Golf Club. DP World Tour held the BMW International, and it was won by Tristan Lawrence on -13, who came through the field late to beat a stumbling Joost Luiten on -12. Three-way tie for third, Maximilian Kiefer, Rikuna Hoshini and Adrian Mironk. Those three are always worth looking at in the DP World Tour events. They're always there and thereabouts. This week it's the British Masters from the Belfry. The LPGA held the KPMG Women's PGA Championship, a major from the Baltusrol lower course in Springfield, New Jersey. It was won by Runing Ying, brilliantly birdieing the last hole to go to -8. One shot clear of Yuka Sasa on -7, with tied third Megan Kang, Stephanie Meadow and Anna Nordqvist coming through the field late on -6. Again, it was a fabulous field and it was brilliant performances all round. Please look out for Rose Zhang. She faltered on the last hole, giving a bogey away, but for her second ever tournament, this girl is really one to follow. The next tournament is another major, but not until the 6th of July. It's the US Women's Open from Pebble Beach Golf Links in California. Horse racing and Royal Ascot last week, we had a number of winners out of the horses we gave you. It was a very successful week. I just want to say a couple of shout outs to our good friends Holly Doyle and Tom Marquand, the power couple of British racing. They had 5 winners between them. Ryan Moore, always the man, 6 winners himself, including the highlights, Paddington in the St James's Palace Stakes. And then we have Frankie, the brilliant magician, 52 years young, still riding winners, but retiring this year. It was his farewell Royal Ascot. He had 5 winners, including a brilliant Gold Cup on Courage Mon Ami. The Northumberland Plate is one to look forward to. We like Zoffy, Live Your Dream and Solent Getaway if they run. And then we have the Irish Derby with brilliant Epsom Derby winner Auguste Rodin trying to do the Derby double. A race a little bit further afield to look forward to is Emily Upjohn versus potentially Paddington in the Coral Eclipse. We're not sure Paddington will run, but Emily Upjohn, we like her for that race. Cricket and the Ashes, the second test for the men, takes place this week at Lord's, the home of cricket, with Australia 1-0 up. And in the women's Ashes, the only test of their series, it's flip-flop either way like the men's. First Australia on top, then England, Australia, then England. And going into the final day, Australia on top. Australia got 473 with 137 not out from Sutherland. England replied with 463 with a world record breaking 208 by Tammy Beaumont. Australia was skittled for 257 in their second innings. England, only needing 268 to win, started brightly but have collapsed to 116 for 5. So the game is in the balance coming to the final day, but Australia are favourites. Tennis and the Queen's Tournament for the men has just taken place with Carlos Alcaraz, the number 1 player in the world, who got injured when playing Novak Djokovic in the recent French Open semi-final, taking the tournament and looking good for Wimbledon, although Novak will be one to beat. And Eastbourne Women's Tournament finalists this weekend, backing onto Wimbledon that starts next week. With the men's, we're going to go with our 4 favourite players, Novak Djokovic, Carlos Alcaraz, Yannick Sinner and Holger Rune, and the women's again, Arina Sabalenka, Elena Rybakina, Iga Swiatek and Ons Jabeur. On to motorsport. Two Wheels and the MotoGP held the Dutch GP at Assen. It was won by current champion Frankie Bagnaia for the Ducati Lenovo team. Marco Bezzecchi fought through to second, also on the Ducati for the Valentino Rossi 46 team. And Alexia Spargaro got a podium at last this season after building back to form for Aprilia. Frankie Bagnaia leads the standings on 194 points. Jorge Martin for Ducati Pramac Racing is 35 back on 159. Just one clear now of Marco Bezzecchi on 158. They're now heading to their summer break and are back on August the 6th with the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. World Superbikes are back this weekend with round 6, the Prosecco UK round from Donington. British Superbikes are back from the 7th to the 9th of July with round 5 and races 13, 14 and 15 from Stetterton using the 300 course. The Speedway Grand Prix held round 5 last week, halfway point through the season, from Gorzów in Poland, and it was won unsurprisingly by the best rider on the planet, Bartosz Szmarzyk, a 3-time champion already. He won in a delayed final. There was 2 restarts, and in the second restart he was third from the tapes, only 3 riders, and he passed Freddie Lindgren on lap 1 and then went underneath Leon Madsen into the final corner to win and bring the house down. Second place, Leon Madsen, back to form, and it's great to see. Third place, Freddie Lindgren from Sweden. Bartosz Szmarzyk now leads the standings on 90 points, and he's a full 21 points clear. That's over 1 Grand Prix victory in front of Jack Holder on 69, with a tied third for Freddie Lindgren and Jason Doyle on 68. They're back on the 15th of July from Manila in Sweden with round 6. NASCAR, it was the Alley 400 from Nashville Superspeedway. Ross Chastain won in the Chevy Camaro for Trackhouse Racing. Second was Martin Truex Jr., Toyota Camry for Joe Gibbs Racing, and his teammate Denny Hamlin was third. Martin Truex Jr. now leads the standings on 576. Tied second, William Byron Chevy Camaro for Hendricks Motorsport with Ross Chastain, who's gone back into second after a victory last weekend. They're on 558. This weekend, it's the Grant Park 220 from the Chicago Street Course. IndyCar's back this weekend with the Honda Indy 200 Mid-Ohio. And Formula E held their USA E-Prix from Portland in Oregon, which was round 12. Nick Cassidy from Envision Racing won the race. Jake Dennis, Avalanche Andretti was second. And Antonio Felix da Costa was third, the Tag Heuer Porsche team. Jake Dennis leads the standings on 154. Nick Cassidy is just 1 point behind on 153. And third place was long-time series leader Pascal Wehrlein for the Tag Heuer Porsche team on 138. They're back next for rounds 13 and 14 on July the 15th and 16th with Italian E-Prix from Rome. Formula One, they're back this weekend with the Austrian Grand Prix from the Red Bull Ring. 2 results to note of our good friends. It was the IMSA weekend at Watkins Glen. The WeatherTech Championship, Louis DELETRAZ, who was in the top class, they finished 6th despite a catastrophic wheel loss when in second place, but fought back through. Brave people, great driving. And our good friend Heather Hadley in the Mazda MX-5 Cup, well, she qualified 24th for both races, and in race 1 finished 18th, and in race 2 finished a brilliant 14th. Well done, Louis. Well done, Heather. That's our SLB Sports Roundup. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us on the last show of June. Another great, great show. I want to say thank you to John Hitman Hathaway for telling us all about how he got into UFC and how he used to play rugby, and a brilliant part 1 from John. To Connie Huq for a new scheme she's bringing out with NatWest for children planning money. And obviously Louis DELETRAZ, who told us all about getting into FIA endurance and his journey through F2 and F1. Thank you to you, the listeners, and thank you to Johan, Rafaela and the team at UK Health Radio who keep us on the air. We'll see you all next week.